honeymoon is over before it's begun?
Well, look, I think that it's pretty clear that the Labour victory was built on sand. Even though there was a lot of hype, it was that they had fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn won in 2019 and 2017. And so the honeymoon theory that you'd normally get was always going to be quite limited with Keir Starmer's government. And he ran on change, and we haven't actually seen the level of change that you would expect. There was, the country was crying out for lots of change, and they're saying they're still pushing austerities. They're still pushing a cap on the two-child benefit. They're still pushing through kinds of austerity that much of the party didn't vote for. So that can explain it, I think.
So you're not surprised that Starmer's favourability rating, as it's called, is 0 at the moment?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I don't think he was ever popular. He has sort of abandoned his base. And he hasn't been able to win any other, he's been able to win some Lib Dem supporters, some people maybe to the liberal end of the Conservative Party. But by and large, he's pushed himself into a corner. It was a strategic mistake for him to do.
Yeah. Tom, I guess you're actually in agreement with our other guest here, with Ashok.
Well, I agree with him that there wasn't huge enthusiasm for Starmer. I think when I was knocking on doors in the last general election, there was a lot of unhappiness with us, but there wasn't great enthusiasm for Starmer. There may have been desire for change in a general sense, but not huge desire for him. And I do think their victory was built on sand. I have to say, though, that a net satisfaction rating of 0 isn't actually that bad when it comes to modern day political politics. I think Rishi Sunak's at the moment is sort of -38 or something like that in the Ipsos survey. And actually, I think by the time it comes to a general election, if Starmer's still at 0, he might be quite happy about that.
What do you... Sorry, go on, Tom, sorry.
But ultimately, though, I do think there are some signs that things may be turning a bit and the honeymoon may be coming to an end. I think it's not just Starmer's score that's come down, but also Cooper and Reeves. They've seen not insignificant drops in their net favourability. So there are some things to be concerned about. I wouldn't be too alarmed if I was Labour right now, but there are some signs of concern. Yeah,
signs of concern, Ashok. I mean, you mentioned, I assume, to put it crudely, you'd like to see a more Corbyn-like government in power, and, it's a democracy. We ain't North Korea, that's fine. You might get that, though, looking at what's happening with the unions. There's a lot of money being splashed around at the moment. It's going to be easier to strike. So maybe Mr. Starmer will become your man after all.
Well, look, the idea that somehow Starmer is somehow pro-union in any meaningful sense is silly. When he was running, he penalized and kicked out people from his shadow cabinet simply for going on picket lines or even supporting picket lines. I mean, he's a neoliberal through and through. He supports austerity. He doesn't want to raise taxes. He isn't raising taxes. He might in the future, but who knows? So the idea that he's somehow in the pockets of the unions when, ASLEF gave him 100,000 seems, contra the empirical evidence. I think that, making it easier for workers to strike when, Britain has some of the most restrictive trade union industrial relations laws, especially since 2017, but even since 1987, since Thatcher, means that it just would be harmonizing more with Western Europe, if anything.
And Tom, I mean, is your sense, when people said before the election, look, this is it's not quite a Blairite thing, but that's what Starmer is doing. He's playing to all galleries, but ultimately, when they get into power, it is not going to suddenly revert to some Michael Foot sort of agenda. But there is a concern from some, bearing in mind who else is around him, that he might go in that direction. He might go... I know Ashok is saying that, he doesn't sense that. Well, as a Conservative, are you sensing that this could be the most left-wing government we've had for several decades?
Well, that is my concern. I think Keir Starmer changes what he says from one week to the next. I think if we look at his position on immigration, for example, wasn't that long ago that he said all immigration law is inherently racist. He was pro-open border. He was pro-freedom of movement being brought back when he was standing to be Labour leader. The campaign he ran to become leader of the Labour Party was a totally different campaign than the campaign he went to the general election. So the guy doesn't stand for anything. He's a principle-free zone. So I can't really predict what he's going to do. But what I would say on the union, I do think Labour need to be careful. I think there's a reality and there's a perception. I think when you have the new parliamentary private secretary, which is the ministerial aide to the Transport Department, who is the son of Sue Gray, by the way, who I understand received £4,000 from the train drivers' union. And then we see the Secretary of State for Transport boasting and saying that we've ended the strikes, we've moved quickly, and the public is seeing train drivers being awarded salaries, I think, approaching £80,000. And then only a few days later, the same train drivers' union say, actually, no, the strikes are back on. So I don't think this is particularly competent leadership. And I also think, bearing in mind how much the Labour Party went on about being anti-cronyism, I think there is the stench of that with the revelations that came out in the weekend papers.
That always happens, though, doesn't it? You know, when everyone, that famous phrase, bonfire of the quangos, and usually what governments mean is, well, just get rid of the quangos that are there and put our own quangos in place, and therefore we don't really see them as quangos. Ashok, final question then. Where do you see this government in 2 years? They've been there just shy of 2 months. Fast forward 2 years, what do you think it'll look like?
Well, to quickly respond, I want to say that it's not 80,000, it's 65,000. The 80,000 is a Sun upper limit article that was written. And, you know, I would just say that, and 4,000 is a pittance when you compare the levels of corruption the Tories, and I would say Labour, I'm not denying that, have indulged in from actual moneyed interests, not the trade unions. And yes, I agree. He lied through and through. He said he would nationalize all the, you know, water, electricity, energy. He said all kinds of promises when he was running, and you turned on all of that and abandoned all that. So it's hard to know. He's a dishonest man. Starmer is a dishonest man, one of the most dishonest politicians. But the idea that he'll be dishonest and move to the left is, I think, contra all of the evidence of anyone who's ever gotten into power. But I think that in 2 years' time, I think we'll move in more in the same direction. More money to Ukraine, more money to gut the conditions of the working class, more tax breaks for the rich. I mean, I don't see I don't see the trajectory and the direction of travel in any way moving to the left, and to the promises he made in 2020 when he ran for the leader of the Labour Party.
Yes.